That Mormon tabernacle's got nothing on us, don't you think? For sheer cute, we win hands down. What a wonderful young assortment of young singers. I want to make sure, Marilyn, where are you, Marilyn? She's going over that way. These are choristers in the making. So we want them to be confident for times to come. We thank our cherub choir as we now collect our wits and our hearts to settle it down as we begin to kindle the Advent wreath. From time out of mind, this church has lifted up the spiritual trinity of St. Paul during Advent of faith, hope, and love. This is the Sunday of love, which sounds warm and should be in a sanctuary that's just a little too cold, which sounds close and intimate in a room that feels awfully vast. And yet, love is not the feeling, but the commitment to care for another person as though that person was you. The golden rule lived in each breath. And so we invite now, as we begin this hour of worship, one devoted to the task of love, we invite Gwen Kirkbride to light the candle of love. I invite you now to join with me in sharing our responsive invocation. In the dwindling of daylight, we light a candle of faith that light will return. In the encroaching cold, we light a candle of hope that warmth endures. In times of fear, we light a candle of love that casts out fear. In times of doubt, we light a candle of joy that dispels all doubt. An Advent story, and especially since we have so many young people, it should be a story to which young people can relate. Anybody here ever been 5 years old? Okay, we got a good audience. Now, I should point out that I'm going to read a book, but a slightly shortened version called How the Grinch Stole Christmas. This hangs in my office all year long. I bring it out just this time of year. I have a great fondness for the Grinch, sort of a modern-day Scrooge. But it's a shorter story, and I think I'll read a shortened version of it for you. Some of you may know some of the words. If you do, that's fine. Every Who down in Whoville loved Christmas a lot. Turn the page. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown as the warm lighted windows below in their town. But he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now, hanging their mistletoe wreath. They're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his drenched fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. That face right there. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat and made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick! With this coat and this hat I look just like St. Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog, Max. Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some empty old sacks on a ramshackle sleigh and hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, get up! And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. Turn the page. Let's get it right. He slid down the chimney. A rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two, then he stuck out his head from the fireplace, flew where the little Who's stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee, and now, grinned the Grinch, I'll stuff up the tree. And then the last thing he took was the log for the fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It has to rhyme, you know. It was 3:15 dawn when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh, pooh to the Whos, was his Grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a minute or two. Then the Whos down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo, and that's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow, but the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. You remember? Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped first Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons, it came without tags, it came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe he thought, Christmas doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. And there ends the Advent reading. We have a very rich morning, and I'd like to invite one of the givers of the wealth today. That would be James Taylor, who is going to talk to you for a moment or two about how we make this place go the way we go. James.
Good morning, everybody. Merry Christmas to each of you from the Taylor family. Every time I come up here, I get a little closer to the sermon, so you guys better watch out for next year. I want to review us for a second, because every time you get asked to do a welcome or come up here, they say, you know, let the congregation know about you. Again, my name is James Taylor. I teach part-time at Davenport, and I own my own event production company. My lovely wife, Amy, is probably sitting up about the third row in the balcony up there. She is a renowned counselor around Grand Rapids. She probably does her best work with children. I've got 2 kids, one of whom is Willa, who was lighting candles this morning. And in a proud dad moment, I'm going to say that in her first swim meet on Friday, she took first in her relay as the anchor. So, you know, absolutely. Henry is my other child. He's up in character school at the moment. He's in 3rd grade. He's a leader in his class. He loves to read, and he's just discovering all the sports that his sister's been doing for 2 years. Now he gets to do them this year. So that's the family. We're getting ready for Christmas this week. I'm up in this place to talk for a minute about our annual pledge drive. Most of you know about it. Every year we ask the members of our congregation to tell us how much money they're able to afford to spend on our church. The basic reason we ask you to do this is that the board puts together this budget in November, and they're trying to figure out what number should we put on that budget. And it's a difficult process because we try to live within our means. All of you know that a few years ago we decided to put our collections that we're about to take in a moment into the cash, and the stuff that's not for church operations just goes right back out to the community. And so we count on the folks in this room to give your pledges and say, hey, the best estimate of what I can afford to give the church is X. There's a couple problems with that system. One, we've got a bunch of pledges in. We're really doing good this year, so I wanted to say thank you to those of you that have put your pledges in. But at the same time, we have to make this budget when only a small part of our pledges are in the door. And so a lot of people ask, does this commit me? What happens if my life changes? And so I wanted to address that for just a half a second. The pledge is not a legal document. We're not going to come to the door, and Fred especially is not going to come and knock on your door and say, hey, you owe us money at the end of the year. This year we wanted to make it very clear that, if your situation changes, give Jack a call in the office in the middle of the year and say, hey, I lost my job or this revenue didn't come in. We can work with that. We just want to make sure that we're kind of getting in what we expect to get in by the end of the year, because surprises are awful for a church. At the end of the year, if you're not tracking right, then awful decisions have to be made. Do we cut people? Do we turn off the lights? Do we make it very cold in here? So if you can do that, we ask you to make the pledge. There's a table out front. If you've forgotten that card and it's somewhere in your pile of bills or something to do at home, just step out to the table at the end of the service and put a name and a number down. We're not asking you to be perfect about it. So I'm going to cut a couple of things here because we don't want this service to go for 2 hours. So how's our pledge drive doing? Very well. We are a little bit up from what we expected from last year, and so that's really great. We've got new people, a lot of folks coming to the early service, so there's a lot to be thankful. I'll end with this. We're an awesome church. Our members are changing the world in notable ways. But to be sustainable, we need all of you to be great marketers and introduce your friends to this great spiritual experiment. With our fierce advocacy, there's no need to hang our heads when evangelicals start to throw stones. We know the reach and the power of your church. It deserves the support of the larger community out there. So bring some friends with you. Thanks for your time this morning. Please pledge today if you haven't done it already. There's a table out there to do that. Merry Christmas. Many blessings to you in the next week. Come on back for our kids' service and for the 11 p.m. service next week.
So
first of all, be warned. There we are. You will have to sing at the end of the next piece that's going to be played at the end of our prayerful moment. So do look ahead. I don't want you to be surprised, so you can join in. But we prepare ourselves through that, through what some would call prayer, meditation, a time of silence. And just in case you don't know, I don't know what I'm going to say until I get to this spot in the service, because it's always a moment that makes itself. And I'm going to embarrass someone now, and I apologize. But in case you haven't noticed, we've had the same piano player for all three pieces, Ms. Cameo Elzinga. And when I'm watching her and her sister, who were helping to direct our little bitty choir, I can't see the kids because they face you. But I can see them as they're facing the kids. And you want to talk about a Christmas gift. It was just a splendid pleasure to watch them pull the music out of them, not with the ferocity of fear, but with a kind of tenderness of expectation. And of course, you saw one of them come down. Was that yours? Came down the steps to hand her the dead bell in the middle of playing the music. And Cameo still managing to play all at the same time. And I want to talk about the reality that we get gifts all the time, but we don't notice them because we're so busy asking for that thing or avoiding that thing or wanting this and hoping not to get that. And in the meantime, things are falling upon us every day. Now, that's a common observation, but how well do we live by it? So I want you to pause for a moment with a promise in your heart as we pray today. Oh, nameless one, do we even dare address you as a you or an it or a where or a how or a when? But somehow there is this sense there is something going on in the world that's bigger than you and me, and so we have to talk as though you were one of us. But we don't so much talk as wish, and we don't so much wish as hope, and we don't so much hope as feel. But what it comes down to is, what will it take us to be alive today without trying, without wanting, without fearing, just to show up, to pluck the bell that doesn't work and hand it to someone we know, to open our mouths in song without caring whether we're in tune, to be present today. What would it take? Why are we so frightened of what other people think? Why are we so wary of how others will see us? Oh, yes, like the hymn we sing, I seek the spirit of a child. But are we not all still children? Of course. So let us be brave enough to be the child we always have been. So the gifts that are given to us every day will bring forth those smiles, those laughs, and even those tears that make us truly alive. Upon these things, and those things which we brought in with us in our hearts, we pause now in that silence which is framed most aptly by silence. And so may it be, and amen. Singing is supposed to make you feel good. And you did it. And thank you. As ever, before I begin my words for this day, I invoke the names and memories of those who have gone before us and whose lives were ended at this season, at this time, and others in years past, those who by their faith and life provided for us this house, this community, this church. And we lift up their names today in gratitude and in memory. Zikron livracha, their memory is a blessing. Ben Bedstead, Marina Sweats, Ann Felgate, Vern Parker, Jack Bowers, Peg Fay, Clarence Zylstra, and Peg Clemens. These and others whose lives came to their end upon this earth at this season in years past. El Malei Rachamim, Shokein Barachamim. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally, bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace. And let us say, Amen. A few verses from Psalm 103. All of my sermons this year I'm going to anchor in a psalm, whether I like it or not. More importantly, whether you like it or not. Psalm 103 is a big, fat, hairy psalm, so I'm only going to give you a few verses, slightly adapted for easier listening. In this case, it's the beginning of a psalm that you may recognize if you're familiar with the show Godspell, because it's the basis of the song, Bless the Lord, my soul, all my being. Bless God's holy name, and goes on to say, who forgives all sins, heals all diseases, who redeems life from the pit, surrounds with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good things in the prime of life so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. God executes righteousness and judgment for all who are wronged, who has made known his ways to Moses and the deeds to the children of Israel. God, who is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, who will not contend forever or nurse anger for all time, who has not dealt with us according to our sins, nor requited us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is God's steadfast love. And as east is far from west, so far has God removed our sins from us. Perhaps it was the first wrestling match ever recorded, but here are some words. Burgeoning in his rage, he rushed to attack him, and Enkidu barred up the door with his foot to Gilgamesh's entry. Would not concede. They grappled and snorted like bulls. The threshold shattered. The very walls quivered as Gilgamesh and Enkidu grappled. They battled to a draw. And the epic of Gilgamesh says that after this battle they became devoted friends, like brothers. I never experienced that with my brother, let me put it to you. But this is a story that we see echoed even in the Jewish scriptures, where Jacob wrestles with a dark angel all night long and won't let go until he gets a blessing. Why mention this today in Advent, on the Sunday about love? Because in a curious sense, wrestling is a form of intimacy. 50-some years ago, I was a middle schooler, and I was in gym class, and the gym teacher was teaching us boys how to wrestle, the sport. You know what I mean? A bit of instruction was given, and we were all paired off, and we were told to grapple with a classmate. Grab him about the waist, stick your hands between his thighs, roll on top of him. And it was not the violence that was off-putting, it was the closeness of having to touch this other person and be touched by him. And I don't mean in a sexual way, but there was a sense of coerced intimacy that was very strange. These ancient characters may have fought in their story, but they were physically close, like lovers, hands upon flesh, embracing in violence, but nonetheless embracing. And I want to start with this ambiguity and anomaly of intimacy being both loving and violent, because sometimes it's hard to tell the difference if we listen to the news in particular. Intimacy is about closeness, about being connected to someone so closely that your heart is beating faster, whether it be for desire or dread. It was that same year, I think, 8th grade perhaps, when we were reading Wuthering Heights in class, that great Gothic novel. And it was as baffling to my mind as wrestling was to my body, because here we were reading about these tortured souls wandering through the windswept moors. What's a moor anyway, and why is the wind sweeping over them? And there was Catherine talking to Heathcliff in that dreadful weather, saying, "Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad, only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you." Whew! Did not know what to make of this intensity of emotion on a page. When we think of love, we always remember Paul's words, love is patient, love is kind, love is never jealous or boastful, and yet our experience of love is that it is frequently the opposite. Impatient, selfish, and very jealous. It's what powers movies, songs, and books. Sometimes it is very difficult to tell the intimacy of love from the intimacy of violence, because the intensity is so powerful. So I want to give you some wisdom today. Some wisdom on how to separate one from the other. It's not my own. It comes from, yes, that ancient source that's contemporary with Gilgamesh and Genesis, the book of Psalms. In particular, Psalm 103. It's among a group of psalms very nearby to each other that are constantly extolling God's love of Israel. Best summarized by those verses you heard a few moments ago. God is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is God's steadfast love, etc. The phrase steadfast love is the one I want to point to, because in Hebrew it's just one word. It's only 2 syllables. Hasdo. It's a word that means the possessive form, meaning his, of love. But there's another word for love that they're not using, and I'm going to get into that for a moment. Another psalm in that same group, Psalm 118, has the phrase, Hodul Adonai ki tov. Praise God who is good, ki leolam hasto, whose steadfast love endureth forever. Did you hear how many syllables in English it takes? Ki leolam hasto, 5 syllables. For his steadfast mercy endureth forever. English is sometimes a very bulky language. In fact, the word hasto is very hard to translate. When the first Jews translated it into Greek for their non-Hebrew friends, they used the word eleos, which means mercy. John Calvin liked it so much, he used that same word. But there is another word for mercy in Hebrew, rachamim. Arabic uses it too, racham. So I think this word hasdo, actually the word chesed, which is the root, chesed, is not about mercy. It's not even about love, because there's another word, ah. So what is it? What is this word? Well, it's hard to say. I could use the Buddhist word, metta, but then you wouldn't know it either. What we have is a word that contains more than one idea of love. Chesed is technically sympathy, but it's too weak. Because we use sympathy like my deepest sympathies on the bottom of a card. We mean it, but not in the way that the word is constructed. Sympathos, with suffering. to suffer with, to endure alongside, to share in a difficult time. How many of us really suffer when someone else is suffering? Not too often. If you have children, you know it very clearly. And once you've had children, I'm not to leave out you who don't have children, but it's the way I knew it. It's the way I came in touch with it. And the time I learned it was not with my own child. No, it happened to me quite by accident. I'm in my second church. I get those Sunday newspapers, you know, they used to have the magazine in it. Did they call it Parade Magazine? Is that what they used to call it? And I'm reading through the magazine, and there's a photograph in the magazine. I don't even remember why, but I cut it out because it was so important to me. It was a picture taken the day after the bombing of Hiroshima. And you've seen some of them, the skeletons, the bodies, but this is not that picture. No, this is a picture of a toddler, perfectly healthy, sitting in the rubble, crying. And it was exactly the same age as my son at that moment. And when I saw that picture, I wanted to go through that picture and pick up that baby and hold it, but I could not because I didn't want that child to suffer. Have you had that experience somewhere in your life, somewhere when you knew you had to stop a suffering, whether it was a child or a parent or a spouse or a friend? Have you known that heartbreak? Then you have known chesed, the steadfast love. It is not the loving, charming, singing, sweet. No, it's the Catherine on the moor saying, I must be close to you because if I am apart from you, I perish. Sympathy, but much more. We need a word that goes deeper than that. Okay, another story. This sermon made so much more sense on the page, it makes no sense now. Go ahead and read it later, you'll like it. Because I'm torn with trying to get the nugget of what I want you to have, and I want you to have it, and I'm going to fail, but I'm going to try anyway. Well, last month, I was back in my previous church to attend the funeral of my predecessor, the man who served his entire career there. I'm now at an age when going to funerals of clergy is a ministry unto itself. Well, when he was alive, he told me stories of when he was there. And he told this story, which is an illustration that leads up to a quote that I think expresses what I mean. So it's a 1, 2, 3, okay? Are you ready? So I'm telling you the story about the story. Well, he tells this story, the man who died, of how one night early in his career, it was raining very heavily. He was walking from the church back to the parsonage, a route I know very well. And there was a woman helping a man through the rain, and it was clear as he saw them that the man was beyond tipsy. He really needed help. So as he approached them, he took up the other side of the man, and in the drenching rain, he helped her and the man to the doorway of the brownstone, where they were in the light. Where in the light of the doorway, he looked and beheld that he was helping Marilyn Monroe get Arthur Miller to home without falling down. That's what happens when you live in New York. Now, why do I tell you that story? Because I never met them, but I did know the man who knew the woman. How about that? Marilyn Monroe herself was giving chesed that moment. She, at another point, said, I'm selfish, impatient, and a little insecure. I make mistakes, I am out of control, and at times hard to handle. But if you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best. Chesed. Chesed is being devoted to someone at their worst. Not because they're at their worst, because you're devoted to them, no matter who they are. That's the word chesed, chasdo. That is the biblical notion of love. It is not feeling bad for someone and writing a card. It's being involved with someone while they are enduring suffering. It is hard work, not a feeling, but an action. In my work this week, I bumped into James Baldwin, who never has something less than wonderful to say. He said, love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is a growing up. Chesed. It is the reason why a couple makes vows at an altar in front of God and everybody. Because if they don't say it, they may not actually mean it when the time comes. You know, I tell couples who come to me to do their wedding, and I say, you only have one job, being nervous. And any couple that is not nervous on their wedding day is not getting married. Maybe legally, but they're not getting married. More often, though, even though they say, oh, we've planned everything, and they've got it all nailed down, then they're standing right there. And I'm looking right at them. And all their friends and family are right there. And then at that moment, hands begin to tremble and sweat. The words they memorized, they can't remember. Voices crack. Tears drop. Good. They're about to undertake chesed. Because marriage is not about how much you love that person. It is how much you are devoted to that person. Love that is a battle, that is a war, that is a growing up, that is the going from day to day, from the worst to the best and back again. Chesed means you're answering the question, will I be there no matter what? We all know the song, Love Makes the World Go Round. Someone once opined that it doesn't make the world go round, but it makes the ride worth taking. And I think it's wrong on both counts. Love of the kind I mean, this chesed, holds the world together. In the Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers, part of the oral tradition of Judaism, in the very first chapter, in the very second verse, one of the rabbis says, Al shlosha devarim, on three things stand the world. You know what they are? Torah, the truth, avodah, service, and gemilut chasidim, deeds of love. Chesed is not Valentine's Day. It isn't roses. It's cleaning the toilet because your friend, your spouse, your parent, your child cannot, and doing so eagerly. Chesed is going to recitals and ball games with a cold, feeling miserable, but showing up. Chesed listens to the same joke your grandfather told for the 15th time and laughing each and every time. Chesed says you look great because I know you don't feel you look great. Chesed knows her pain is real and deserves your company. Chesed says that my suffering is your suffering and we can carry it together. Chesed says that a baby in Hiroshima 70 years ago can and still should break your heart because you can't comfort him even though he's now 75 years old, because that baby still exists in that man's breast. You know, we religious liberals, we scoff, I think, about people who believe all those wild stories about angels and wise men and infant gods and virgin mothers. And what we forget sometimes, what we overlook, is that all that stuff is wrapped around the promise of chesed. We all want something, someone who will love us at our worst. Who, when we are sitting in the wreckage of life, crying, nose running, will pull us to their breast and hug us and protect us. That's what the Christian story has at bottom, is this hope, this promise that something loves us no matter what, no matter who. I can find that story elsewhere, which is why I am not a formal Christian. But I do not overlook that this story says you are loved at your worst, and I won't let you go. I will not let you go. The promise of the gospel, that such love has the power to cast out fear, as St. John puts it. In those counterculture days back in the 1960s, I found these great words from Jimi Hendrix. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. Yes, but it sounds a little pat, a little bit of a cliche, unless we mean love that is chesed. But if we mean that, chesed, steadfastness, devotion, sympathy, the love that is there when we are at our worst, that really can overturn the love of power. Because that means all of us who sat in the wreckage of our lives as toddlers and wept, will have someone who loves us back. That love has the power to hold the world together. For as the heavens are high above the earth, and east is far from the west, so great is chesed, that as the words of the psalm say, Ki leolam hasdo, for forever he is faithful. May such love be ours to know at some moments in our lives. And may we know in our world the promise of such love and the hope of its fulfillment. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my redeemer. Forgive.